The sanctity of life is fundamental to Judaism, as it is to many other faiths. As we all know, there has been an increase nationwide of school-related violence, and we've actually had it here in the state of Maryland. We've had bomb threats, we've had kids show up at schools with guns, we've had media in Annapolis. So we're continuing to see this important national conversation about gun violence. So my question to all of you, how do we prevent gun violence? What measures do you believe need to be taken at the federal level to ensure the safety of our public and private schools students? So with that, why don't we start in the middle with Ms. Hober, and we'll go to Mr. Glove, Mr. Caldwell, and to Mr. Jones. Kind of a variety here.
We'll jump around. Okay, I totally support keeping guns out of the hands of people that have mental problems or are prone to violence. And you know, I'll again go back to a little comment on the threat I had in Frederick the other day, which has now been turned over to Sheriff Jenkins. We need to be able to report people that demonstrate that they are likely to make threats against other people. That's a major problem. And it isn't so much that we need to, lock them up or anything, but we need to make sure that those people are tagged so that they have no access to guns. We need to enforce our current background checks. We need to solve the problem of the states that today do not report the results of their background checks into the national system. There is a national system that tracks those things, and it needs to be fully complied with, and it is not complied with in many parts of the country. We need to do other things that are simple things for schools and synagogues. We need to lock the doors. I will note that both Sandy Hook and several of the other school shootings, the doors were not locked. Here they are now in Montgomery County. They are at our synagogue at the Tzedek all the time. And you have a special code to get in when you wish. But you need to lock the doors, you need to enforce that. Again, there's a case where you can use better technology. Mark and I were actually visiting a company not very long ago that makes a very small device that can be put at school entrances or even synagogue entrances or mosque entrances that tracks the metal being carried through a door. This is something that would help quite a lot in many cases. In terms of gun law itself, I am a supporter of the Second Amendment, as I am for the entire Bill of Rights. On the other hand, there are some restrictions to the rights in the Bill of Rights. You are not allowed to yell fire in a crowded coliseum. You're also not allowed, in my view, to buy military weaponry. There are reasonable restrictions that can be placed here without violating the Bill of Rights, in my view. And I think we need to teach people to do practical things like revise the HIPAA laws. That's something that ought to be done in Congress. Today, because of privacy, a doctor is not allowed to report an unstable person who is making threats. If you are making a general threat that you're going to go out and shoot up a school, they cannot be reporting it today. If you make a specific threat, I'm going to go out and shoot John Doe, then they can report it. We need to change that in Congress.
Okay, so we have no trouble looking at research that was done overseas when it comes to medical problems. But we seem to have trouble doing that when it comes to this specific problem. If you look at charts that show the number of guns per 100 people in the country, in different countries around the world, on the x-axis, the y-axis is the number of mass murders, or killings, or suicides, any one of those three. You'll see we sit alone. Everybody else has low numbers. We have a large number of guns, a large number of suicides and murders. It's not a coincidence. We know that. Does that mean I'd like to see all guns go away? No. want a revolver to protect your home and your personal belongings, fine. You want to hunt deer, especially if you're going to eat them, that's fine with me as well. So, in other countries like Australia, 20 years ago, were fed up with this. They decided to buy back all guns of mass destruction. They did, and the numbers went down. Waited. I'd like to see us go back, at least go back to a bill that the Republicans were happy with, the Brady bill, after the attempted murder of President Reagan. After that, we decided to get rid of military, not allow military-style arms. And I think that's probably where we should be again. And I'll see the rest of my time. Whoever else.
Mr. Caldwell.
Sure. Okay. This is very similar to most of the problems we face. And once again, I've secured just about everything. I've guarded schools in foreign countries, in war zones. So I've told the kids in the high school, many of them that I visited here, had the parties or Congress, or locally even, had the will to secure schools, it would have been done a long time ago. We are not talking about something that is like trying to build a colony on Saturn or something like here. It's defending something that we always do. Now, you want to go into Congress, you want to go into a football game, a concert, or anything to that effect, you're going to pass through security. Pass through more security to go see Neil Diamond in concert than I did to go to the schools here in the 6th Congressional District. So I'm telling you, it's not a problem of being able to do it. Your representatives, both at the federal, state, and local levels, just have not had the will to do it. And it simply is. We have the will, we have the resources, you go do it. The politicians haven't wanted to do it. Now they do it because we have the school shootings. And it sounds real nice to say, hey, let's do this, let's keep these people from doing this, or these folks from doing that. We'll pass a common sense gun law. Well, I've been to some of these other foreign countries that I've been in. Guns are illegal in Britain. Okay, so what the criminals do is they know the people at home don't have guns. So they knock on the door and stick a gun in their face and rob them completely. So it's a political game that they're playing with you. It's another political lie to keep you supporting the status quo. When if they wanted to do it, we could have done it. I could have taken a group of 18-year-olds that have trained in the Army, and we can secure a school anywhere in the nation, and we can secure a nation itself. So this is a problem that has been basically created by the same people who want to sell you the solutions, and you'll go back to them for it. As far as gun laws go, and my general one, I support the Second Amendment. Some folks have heard me say this before, but it is a quote from a famous American. The United States Constitution does not say that the government gives you and I the right to bear and keep arms. What our law of the land says is that you and I, by the fact that we exist here on this planet, have the right to keep and bear arms, and the government shall make no law to infringe upon your right. I've slept and been around, stood on top of weapons of all kinds. I've slept around 100 guns loaded, 1,000 Marines with guns loaded. Guns do not kill people. People kill people.
Mr. Trump.
I just want to say that was horrible. You know, I grew up on a farm, and when I was 14, my dad taught me how to hunt pheasant and rabbits. I've been around shotguns, hunting all my life. And that's not what we're talking about here. That's not what this discussion is about. This discussion is about 5, 6, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds. It's not a political lie, as you just said. It's about little kids going to school and not coming home. Not coming home. And you know what? Locking the door at school? Okay, fine. But that's not a solution. That's not a solution. We have to change this gun culture. There's a lot of easy things that should be done. But the PACs, the National Rifle Association, they block it. why we don't take PAC money. Any congressman or senator is taking money from the NRA, you shouldn't vote for them. Don't vote for them. All they understand is losing their job. They need to lose their jobs. Yes, common sense gun safety, high capacity magazines. We need to fix assault style rifles, bump stocks, gun show loophole. All those things have to get fixed. Trigger locks. What's wrong with that? But at the end of the day, there's another tragedy. 22,000 people die of gun suicide every year. And don't tell me it's the gun's fault, it's their fault, because they suffer some mental illness, anxiety and depression, and the gun was available. We hadn't followed smart legislation, such as trigger locks. And those folks will never come back. But one moment they were depressed, and in one moment their lives, and the lives of their families, and their friends and loved ones, it all took a 180-degree turn. It could never be recovered. So we've got to fix this. And it's Congress's fault that it's happened. Kids have helped lead the charge, the latest massacre. We went to the gun rally with Congressman John Delaney. He took over a dozen buses. We were all there together. And we've got to stand with the children who are leading the way. Thank you.
You didn't say your name. Right, yeah, it has to be your actual name. That's why I said candidates, be careful what you say. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of foreign countries, so let's turn to a country outside of the United States that is very near and dear to many people in this room, Israel. Recently, Israel celebrated its 70th birthday, and earlier this year, on May 14th, the United States opened its embassy in Jerusalem, enacting the U.S. policy that was set forth in a bipartisan Jerusalem Embassy Act of 1995. At the same time, the security climate in Israel and Gaza has deteriorated, with Hamas terrorists threatening the destruction of Israel. Further, the humanitarian situation in Gaza has also worsened. So I kind of have a three-part question for you. The first thing is, one, do you believe that Israel has an absolute right to defend itself from terrorist threats? Second, if so, how do you balance that with the humanitarian situation that's going on in Gaza? And then the last part, what do you see as your role in strengthening and supporting the U.S.-Israel relationship, and what can be done to combat the assault on Israel's legitimacy and sovereignty by the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement? So I know it's a long question, so I'll be a little bit lenient with the time here. We're still going to have the 3-minute time limit, but try to keep to that, but if you go a little over, we'll be a little lenient here. So why don't we start with Mr. Gluck, since he has not gone first yet, and then we'll go to Mr. Trone, Mr. Caldwell, and then to Mr.
Okay. To continue the description of my family background, I have many cousins in Israel, and they are across the entire spectrum there. I have a cousin whose wife grew up on a kibbutz where they raised pigs. I also have a cousin who is married to a daughter of one of the ex-chief rabbis of Israel. So you can see why it's in a way, to answer the third question first, Israel absolutely has an absolute right to defend itself. And based on what I've just told you, I feel in any negotiation, the right of having an Israeli Jewish state in Israel is not negotiable. So I say that, and now I want to talk about something that hasn't happened here in the United States for 40 years. That is, we have not been, I don't think we can consider it an honest broker in trying to mediate any kind of peace between the Palestinians and Israel in 40 years. And I think the four of us at the table here, I think I'm probably the only one based on what I just told you about my family there and also my feelings and demonstrations here. And also, I should tell you, my wife and I were in Israel last December to celebrate our grandson's bar mitzvah on top of the side. We weren't there 24 hours before my family, left side of the family, took me. I was happy to go to a demonstration in Tel Aviv against the present administration in Israel. Not Israel itself, but the present administration in Israel. So I feel I've demonstrated against corruption in Israel, which, by the way, we were told while we were demonstrating that large numbers of Orthodox had demonstrated the Sunday before, and they're going to demonstrate the next day against the corruption that's going on in Israel right now. Just quickly, as far as BDS is concerned, I think it's a very slippery slope when we try to tell people they can boycott. We've seen boycotts help folks throughout the world. If you want to not boycott, that's fine. If you want to indicate why that's a problem, I think that's fine, but I think we cannot silence speech or boycotts to get in trouble. One last thing, we ought to be careful about this idea of my enemy's enemy is my friend. We did that with the Mujahideen, and they've come back to fight us all over the East. So we need to be careful about that as well. And again, we're going to say, I think I'm the only one here who will be an honest broker, and I'll be happy to go to the Middle East with Congress people of various religions or no religion at all.
Mr. Karen?
All right, great question. I've been over to Israel and through the Gaza Strip up to Ramallah, to Jerusalem, to the Golan. We were just there recently, our family in February. We've spoken about this very often. We absolutely need a two-state solution, but it's hard to achieve that if we don't have a partner that we can negotiate with due to the lack of leadership on the other side. At the same time, we've got to be there to defend Israel and allow them to make their decisions autonomously, without pressure from the United States to do what's right. They're the only democracy, our only friend, our only real friend. Don't count Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. And we've got to be there for them on $3.8 billion budget they receive to make sure they have a qualitative edge, a technology edge in the area of weapons, because they're living on the edge of disaster. So yes, we have to unequivocally support Israel, but at the same time, if they cross the line, we can be critical for sure. But that being said, BDS is BS. I've worked with Senator Cardin on the anti-BDS bill that he and Portman put forth. I've been in the ACLU for over 20 years. The ACLU's had difficulty with that bill on some First Amendment rights. We tried to work together. We made good progress to move that bill forward. And now it's going to hopefully become law. We can't allow that to continue. At the same time also, we have to keep looking at what's happened with Iran. Iran is the greatest threat. Iran has one issue: drive Israel into the sea, support Hamas, Hezbollah. So we have to be there to support Israel unequivocally. At the same time, we have to admire the Israelis' progressiveness and humanitarian nature. It doesn't get up in the newspapers. All they talk about is at the border in Gaza now, flying kites with bombs. And they talk about there's some casualties. And it's horrible if there are, because we need to help those folks in Gaza. But allowing Hamas to run roughshod because they're not helping themselves. But right outside of Gaza, Israel has hospital facilities, free of charge. Folks that are hurt, that are suffering, can be taken care of. Same thing in the Lebanon border. Same thing in the Syria border. Israel is a very humanitarian nation, but you don't read about that in the paper. Because it's not that popular. It doesn't sell papers. But we need to be there to support Israel, continue to support it at a bipartisan level. It's not Democrats or Republicans, it's everybody bipartisan.
Thank you.
Could you repeat the second part of that question?
The second part is, what do you see as your role in strengthening or supporting the U.S.-Israel relationship? And along those lines, what can be done to combat the assault on Israel's legitimacy and sovereignty by boycott, divestment, and sanctions?
The first part of the question, does Israel have, every country has its own sovereignty to defend itself against terrorism. That's an easy yes. The other part about the humanitarian parts, the most important thing a congressman can do to help us overall is that we really have to facilitate. There will never be peace in the Middle East until the people there want peace more than they want war or death or the other things that they're suffering from. Now we can do a lot of things to facilitate that. One of the main problems in the Middle East, and this certainly with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that we don't hold a lot of sway in these ones is because we have been on the wrong side of history too many times in our foreign policy. A very small group of self-interested people have driven our foreign policy, not for the interest of us or even the people of those countries, but it's been driven based on corporate and special interest around the world that our foreign policy has been set by. So we have to be on the right side of it in order to have any validity with the two people that we are trying to say, hey, take our advice to negotiate this peace process, or take our advice when we say you're being inhumane to some of these folks. But we do not have the stance to stand on or the moral ground to stand on because we've been the way we've done everything else in the past. Those two countries aren't going to give us much credibility when trying to lead them to the peace table as well. And I agree, Iran is a massive problem. But let me remind you, the party of the person that just brought up is the one that wanted to arm Iran with a nuclear weapon. And there are many of us that would never do that in a million years. I have fought, my father has fought as a two-time Purple Heart recipient in Vietnam. We've been fighting this country's wars for decades upon decades. And when we are at that point, when you have to have troops on the ground fighting, your foreign policy has failed. So I am the only one up here that if we have to go and defend Israel or live up to that, the fact that they are. My wife is also a lieutenant commander in the Navy. I am the only one up here who would send directly one of their family members into that conflict. So you can bet by your bottom dollar that we will have a clear interest in doing so. But our biggest challenge in foreign policy is to be standing on the right side of history instead of the special interest side of history. Thank you.
Israel has an absolute right to defend itself. Every country has an absolute right to defend itself against incursions and against threats that come into it from outside. I have stood with Israel for years on this issue. I am part of the team that put together the technology that created the Iron Dome. Israel would not be nearly in as good shape today without the work that I co-sponsored when I was Deputy Undersecretary of the Army to upgrade the Patriot missile system to become the Iron Dome. I also worked with Israel on the development of an 81 millimeter mortar, which you probably have actually used. I have worked with them on technological advances for their defense for nigh on to 30 years now. And I continue to work with the Technion, which is their university that is equivalent to MIT, on technical developments. And they send students over to MIT to do graduate research every year. And Mark and I meet with those students and talk to them about their projects and about their plans for their futures. I am a strong ally of Israel and will continue to be. I am also a very strong opponent of the Iran agreement. I published my first paper arguing against that agreement well before I decided to run for Congress. And actually, our current Congressman John Mulaney's support of that agreement was one of my triggers to say somebody needs to stand up and talk about this issue. I'm very strong on those things, and I believe I will continue to be. There's also the economic interest that Mark's company has a company subsidiary over in Haifa with several hundred people. We've been over there to visit that subsidiary, and I've also been there as a tourist. But we're very committed to keeping on working to keep Israel strong, to protect itself. Now, on the BDS thing, like as I said earlier on discrimination and discriminatory and bigotry acts, I'm firmly opposed to that. I stand with Governor Hogan and have talked to him about what he has done to prohibit companies here in Maryland from doing business with any other companies that support BDS. As you may know, Governor Hogan has endorsed me, and this is one of the things that I find very strongly in agreement with him. Thank you.